Hi, everybody. Welcome to Christian Homestead. My name is Jared. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe. When I first started this channel about 4 years ago, I became friends with Troy Abels. We're still really good friends. He has the Last Dispensation channel. And I remember him giving me advice in his experience doing his channel. And he was like, with the second coming, you're going to go through all the different things, the prophecies and stuff like that. And then once you go through all those topics, you're going to be like, oh, well, what's next? Like, there isn't anything else. I covered everything. And he's obviously continued his channel. I've continued my channel. But there are times when I'm like, okay, I've been doing this full time for almost 4 years. It's going to be 4 years in August. And sometimes I do wonder, I've collected so much on my spreadsheets. And is the day going to come where there's no other interesting visions or quotes or doctrines that are not very well known? And then I just wake up the next day and then there's another one. And here we go. I don't think it is going to end. I don't. So I found a very, very, very interesting prophecy of President Brigham Young about the Solid Temple and temples in general, and a vision that he had. And this, what I'm about to read to you, is rich with stuff for my spreadsheets. So just, oh my gosh, here we go. Okay, we're in Journal of Discourses, Volume 1. And the occasion is the laying of the cornerstones for the Solid Temple. The date is April 6th, 1853. Okay, at this part of his discourse, he says, though the enemy had power to kill our prophet, that is, kill his body, he did not accomplish all that was in his heart to accomplish, did he, meaning Joseph Smith, did he not accomplish all that was in his heart to accomplish in his day? He did, to my certain knowledge. And I have many witnesses here that heard him declare that he had done everything he could do. He had revealed everything that could be revealed at present. And at present is in italics. We're going to come back to that. He had prepared the way for the people to walk in, and no man or woman should be deprived of going into the presence of the Father and the Son and enjoy an eternal exaltation if they would walk in the path he had pointed out. We've recently talked about this on the channel. Elder Bednar said that with the restoration of the church, Joseph Smith received everything that was necessary for the foundation of the church and for exaltation. But it's not over. Now, it's been a while since we've gone over these two quotes, but this is on my spreadsheet called Quotes A through Z. The first one, and this is currently row 289 for Joseph Smith Jr. He knew more. And I actually have 4 quotes, but I just want to read from these two. So this one is from Robert Horn, an early member of the church. He was interviewed for Millennial Star. The name of the article is Reminiscences of the Church in Nauvoo. And he said something super interesting. On May 23rd, 1843, I listened to a discourse preached in the Nauvoo Temple, which was then only partially finished. Brother Joseph was talking on the pre-existence of our spirits, in our relations to God in the spirit world, in our standing in the family circle of our Father. Now, I am telling the truth, and I remember that while thus talking, suddenly turned around to the apostles sitting on the stand and said, in effect, brethren, if I were to tell you all I know of the kingdom of God, I do not know that you would rise up and kill me. Isn't that interesting? And I have no doubt about that, because you have so many people nowadays that are so against modern day prophets. They'll go to the scriptures, or they'll go to Joseph Smith or other early prophets. But there's people that will draw a line, in anyone after that line, they treat like they're just a man. that there's no more revelation to be had. And there is. Joseph Smith had a lot more than what he revealed to the church. It's according to the Lord's time. Continuing, Brother Brigham arose and said, "Don't tell me anything that I can't bear, for I don't want to apostatize." Brother Joseph, addressing the apostles, said, "The weight of this kingdom has been a millstone around my neck, and I'm going to roll it off on your shoulders, and then the kingdom of God will go on." And then before we get to the cornerstone discourse with President Brigham Young, I want to read this one too. This is, at the time, Elder John Taylor of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, Journal of Discourses, Volume 10, pages 147 to 148. No wonder that Joseph Smith should say that he felt himself shut up in a nutshell. There was no power of expansion. It was difficult for him to reveal and communicate the things of God because there was no place to receive them. What he had to communicate was so much more comprehensive, enlightened, and dignified than that which the people generally knew and comprehended. It was difficult for him to speak. He felt fettered and bound, so to speak, in every move he made, and so it is to the present time. Yet, this being a fact, and these being part of the things we expect to accomplish, there must be a beginning somewhere. And if the chips do fly once in a while when the hewer begins to hew, and if you do squirm once in a while, it is not strange, because it is so difficult for the people to comprehend the things which are for their benefit. We have been brought up so ignorantly, and our ideas and views are so contracted, it is scarcely possible to receive the things of God as they exist in his bosom. You guys, these are words of wisdom, and we would do well to prepare ourselves for whatever is revealed next, whether it's before the second coming or during the millennium, because we do not have it all, and it is not all in the scriptures, and it is not all in the words of these early prophets. We don't have it all. All we have is everything that's necessary for exaltation and some additional things that have been revealed, which is really all that we need, but there's more. Okay, continuing. From the day that he fell until this day, if there is one item of business, if there is one thing that should have been done by this people that has not been done, I cannot call it to mind. Though it looked gloomy for a month or 6 weeks past, the weather being so unfavorable with regard to being ready to lay those cornerstones today, I'm happy to say that there has been a great deal of faith manifested by the saints, and through the faith of the Lord, through that faith, the Lord has granted unto us the desire of our hearts, or else the devil has been sent on an errand another way and has forgotten himself. I do not think, however, he need trouble himself much about the world, for he has them secure enough. Perhaps he may have slept a little too long, as he has not been here on this notable day. I attribute it to our Father in heaven for giving us this beautiful weather today. All right, let's pause here, because here's a weather event, a sign, and I'm starting to collect a lot of these where you have something taking place, usually like a dedication of something, whether it's a temple or maybe it's a groundbreaking ceremony, in this case, the laying of the cornerstones of the Salt Lake Temple, where the weather cooperates for that event. I have a spreadsheet called Signs Church Specific. So, and for these type of events, I have them color-coded in blue right here. So this is the earliest one that I have as far as weather events go. But I have this one. So I have 1, let's see, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh, 7. That's a great number. So there's been a few just with President Nelson. It happened in Seattle at Safeco Field. It happened in Samoa. It happened when he was dedicating the site for the future Ephraim, Utah temple. So that was just with President Nelson, these three, but we have other ones too, including one here in Independence, Missouri at the dedication of the Independence Visitor Center. I'm also collecting these. I actually have some work to do, but I'm also trying to collect these on quotes A through Z. Currently row 596 for weather. This row has been neglected for a little while. Okay, let's go back to this. We're getting to this prophecy about the Salt Lake Temple and other temples. So interesting. Okay. He says, I do not like to prophesy much. I never do, but I will venture to guess that this day and the work we have performed on it will long be remembered by this people and be sounded as with a trumpet's voice throughout the world, as far, as loud, and as long as steam, wind, and the electric current can carry it. It's a really interesting thing for him to say, especially with the renovation of the Salt Lake Temple and all the prophecies that we know are associated with the Salt Lake Temple. It really is a special temple, and I think that we should prepare for the rededication, which will probably be at the end of 2027. Okay. It is a day in which all the faithful will rejoice in all time to come. Some will inquire, do you suppose we shall finish this temple, Brother Brigham? I have had such questions put to me already. My answer is, I do not know, and I do not care any more about it than I should if my body was dead and in the grave, and my spirit in paradise. I never have cared but for one thing, and that is simply to know that I am now right before my Father in heaven. If I am this moment, this day, doing the things God requires at my hands, and precisely where my Father in heaven wants me to be, I care no more about tomorrow than though it never would come. I wanted to include this because I think that's a really good spiritual thought, especially for this channel. You know, we talk a lot about the future and prophecies, what's going to happen, when's it going to happen, how's it going to happen, and all that's great, but let's make sure that we're right with our Heavenly Father and the Lord. Let's make sure that we're keeping the Sabbath day holy, going to church, taking the sacrament, going to the temple, serving others, consecrating our time and talents, and doing everything that we know we should do, because that's really the most important thing. Okay. I'm going to skip a little bit. This I do know. There should be a temple built here. I do know it is the duty of this people to commence to build a temple. Now, some will want to know what kind of a building it will be. Wait patiently, brethren, until it is done, and put forth your hands willingly to finish it. I know what it will be. I'm not a visionary man, neither am I given much to prophesying. When I want any of that done, I call him Brother Heber. He is my prophet. He's referring to President Heber C. Kimball, who was a member of the first presidency. He loves to prophesy, and I love to hear him. I scarcely ever say much about revelations or visions, but suffice it to say, and here we go, 5 years ago, last July, so he's referring to the July of 1847. So that's when he came to the Salt Lake Valley. And without him specifying it, maybe it's when he first went and identified the spot for the temple. It's kind of what it sounds like here, but that's when he's referring to. July of 1847. 5 years ago, last July, I was here and saw in the spirit the temple not 10 feet from where we have laid the chief cornerstone. I have not inquired what kind of a temple we should build. Why? Because it was represented before me. I have never looked upon that ground, but the vision of it was there. I see it as plainly as if it was in reality before me. Wait until it is done. I will say, however, that it will have 6 towers to begin with. I highlighted that in red. 6 towers to begin with, which begs the question, is the plan to have more towers at some point in the future? In just a minute, we're going to look at what the towers represent and why that may actually make sense. Maybe in the millennium, there's going to be another tower added, or who knows, maybe 3. I'll show you what I'm talking about in just a minute. But he's telling them at the laying of the cornerstones that initially, to begin with, it will have 6 towers instead of 1. Now, do not any of you apostatize because it will have 6 towers and Joseph only built 1, referring to the Kirtland Temple and Nauvoo Temple. It is easier for us to build 16 than it was for him to build 1. The time will come when there will be 1 in the center of temples we shall build, and on the top, groves and fish ponds. But we shall not see them here at present. So, some of this is a little unclear. He's definitely at the beginning talking about the Salt Lake Temple starting with 6 towers. And then he seems to talk about other future temples that would have a tower, or I guess a spire, in the center. So let's take a look at that really quick. Well, let's first start with this. Let's talk about the spires of the Salt Lake Temple. There's two quotes I want to read. What do they represent? Okay, so we have this from Truman O. Angell, the architect of the Salt Lake Temple. And if I'm not mistaken, he was also the brother-in-law of Brigham Young. You can find this in Millennial Star, May 5th, 1874. The name of the article is The Salt Lake City Temple. And he says, I'm just going to read this first paragraph. Each tower has a spire and 12 pinnacles, emblematical of the first presidency, 12 apostles, high council, bishops, and their counselors. Okay, and then also this. The east center spire rises 200 feet. The spire on the west center rises 194 feet. So, and the reason why is because of this. Let's go to, let me fix this. Elder Harold B. Lee of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. Later, he became president of the church. This is the April 1942 General Conference. And he says, the spires on the eastern towers of the temple are to represent the presidency of the Melchizedek priesthood. So these are the ones that are higher than the ones on the west. And it's because they represent the presidency of the Melchizedek priesthood. And then he says, the spires to the west, the presidency of the Aaronic priesthood. Or in other words, the presiding bishopric. So, Brigham Young, we just read that the temple will start with 6 towers. Let's take a look. Let's look at a picture of the temple. This is a picture I took back, it was probably 2010, maybe 2011, around Christmas time. And this is one of my favorite pictures I've ever taken. Anyway, so you have basically the first presidency represented here with these towers or spires. And then you have the presiding bishopric represented here in both of them together representing, the Melchizedek and the Aaronic priesthood. So maybe it would make sense in the future when Christ comes, maybe there would be another spire that would represent Christ, because he is going to be here in person, presiding and directing his church. Now, we have the quote from Joseph Smith. I'm not going to read it, where he said that Christ is probably not going to be here the entire 1,000 years. He has other things he has to do. But for all intents and purposes, we're going to have the second coming. He's going to take the reins and he is going to personally be here. And so maybe it would be appropriate to make that modification to the temple and maybe have a central spire or something like that. I also want to point out when we look at, oh yeah, by the way, I always like to point this out. This concept was present in both the Kirtland and the Nauvoo temples. They had these assembly rooms and you had pulpits. These pulpits on the east side representing the Melchizedek priesthood. And then when you turn around, you have the pulpits on the west side that represent the Aaronic priesthood. So you're essentially seeing this here with the Salt Lake Temple. And the Salt Lake Temple on that top floor also has an assembly room that has the pulpits on either side. Now, I've looked at some other temples of the church. It's interesting to note that, to the best of my knowledge, the only other temple that kind of resembles the Salt Lake Temple in this way is the Washington, D.C. temple. Because you have the 3 towers and spires on this side, and then the ones on this side are higher, just like the Salt Lake Temple. So it's a very similar configuration. This is the temple of our nation's capital. Well, I have an international audience, so if you're an American, this is in the capital city of our nation. When it comes to having fish ponds and how did he say it again? Okay, on the top, groves and fish ponds. As far as I know, the only thing like that we have right now is the conference center. The conference center is not a temple. It does have one spire. It's not in the center, but here's a bird's eye view of the conference center. And one of the main features of it is on the roof, you have these like gardens. It's been a long time since I've been up there. So was this like partial fulfillment of what Brigham Young was talking about? I don't know. Are we going to see the day when, I don't know if they would do it on these older temples, but maybe on new temples, they would be more like the conference center in size and with that feature on top. I had some other pictures pulled up. This is a picture I took of the Las Vegas, Nevada temple. It also has 6 spires. It's not quite the same as the configuration of the spires for the Salt Lake Temple or the Washington, D.C. temple, but it does have 6 spires. It's part of a series of temples. I don't know how many there were, maybe like 8 or 10 of them. This is the Dallas, Texas temple. I took this picture too. So this kind of embodies that concept, but nowadays it's much more common to have these temples that have a central spire. They're still making them where they have like double spires, and there's a lot of different things going on. In fact, the Kansas City, Missouri temple, I've honed in on that because it has 2 spires. It doesn't have 6, but I've noticed that places that seem significant to the church, like Kansas City and Rome, those temples tend to also have the same kind of like, they'll have like 2 spires, with the one on the east being higher than the one on the west, even though they just have the 2 spires, but they still kind of emulate the Salt Lake Temple. But a lot of these new temples that are being announced right now, these smaller temples, they mostly have like a central spire. This is the Bountiful, Utah temple. I took this picture as well. This is where me and Jenica got married and sealed. And then here's the temple from my mission, the Madrid, Spain temple. And soon there's going to be one in my mission. It's going to be the Barcelona, Spain temple. All right. And then to finish this up, there's a couple more things I wanted to read. So I didn't have this on my spreadsheet yet for visions and visitations, but here we have Brigham Young saying that he saw the Salt Lake Temple in vision, and that He didn't plan it out that way. That's how he saw it in vision with the 6 towers. And that he saw it clearly. It was very clear. So I put that here. So we have one for 1847. And what's interesting is he said that he never had very many visions or prophecies, but I do have a couple here that are super interesting. They also have to do with not just Utah, but also the Salt Lake Valley. So this is from 1846, and I have a few different quotes here. Let me just read a couple of these. So the first one can be found in a book called New America by William Hepworth Dixon, 3rd edition, page 133. And this is President Brigham Young. A dream of the night, helped by a rush of water from the hillside, not larger than the Zenil, which gave life to Granada and changed the barren Vega into a garden, fixed the site of the New Jerusalem. Brigham Young tells me that when coming over the mountains in search of a new home for his people, he saw, in a vision of the night, an angel standing on a conical hill, which is Ensign Peak, that overlooks the Salt Lake Valley. An angel standing on a conical hill, pointing to the spot of ground on which the new temple must be built. Coming down into this basin of Salt Lake, he first sought for the cone, which he had seen in his dream. And when he had found it, he noticed a stream of fresh hill water flowing at its base, which he called the City Creek. Okay, then we have this from, this is President George A. Smith, first counselor in the first presidency, in Journal of Discourses. We look around today and behold our city clothed with verdure and beautified with trees and flowers, with streams of water running in almost every direction. And the question is frequently asked, how did you ever find this place? I answer, we were led to it by the inspiration of God. After the death of Joseph Smith, when it seemed as if every trouble and calamity had come upon the saints, Brigham Young, who was president of the 12, then the presiding quorum of the church, sought the Lord to know what they should do and where they should lead the people for safety. And while they were fasting and praying daily on this subject, President Young had a vision of Joseph Smith, who showed him the mountain that we now call Ensign Peak. Okay, so not only did he see Ensign Peak and an angel standing on top, and I don't know, for all I know, maybe it was Joseph Smith, maybe he was the angel, but at the very least, now we know that Joseph Smith was involved in this process. President Young had a vision of Joseph Smith, who showed him the mountain that we now call Ensign Peak, immediately north of Salt Lake City, and there was an ensign fell upon that peak. And Joseph said, build under the point where the colors fall, and you will prosper and have peace. The pioneers had no pilot or guide. None among them had ever been in the country or knew anything about it. However, they traveled under the direction of President Young until they reached this valley. When they entered it, President Young pointed to that peak and said he, I want to go there. He went up to the point and said, this is Ensign Peak. Let's go ahead and we'll move on from there. I think there was actually one more, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. This is Elder Erastus Snow of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, Journal of Discourses. And whenever the prophet Brigham Young, the leader of that band of pioneers, was asked the question, whither goest thou? The only answer he could give was, I will show you when we come to it. The prayers of that band of pioneers, offered up day and night, continually unto God, was to lead us, as he had promised, unto a land which by the mouth of his servant Joseph he had declared he would give us for an inheritance. Said the prophet Brigham, I have seen it in vision, and when my natural eyes behold it, I shall know it. They therefore, like Abram of old, journeying by faith, knowing knowing not whither they went, only they knew that God had called them to go out from among their brethren, who had hated, despised, and persecuted them, and driven them from their possessions, and would not that they should dwell among them. And when they reached this land, the prophet Brigham said, "This is the place where I in vision saw the ark of the Lord resting." So here's another element, the ark of the Lord resting. "This is the place whereon we will plant the soles of our feet, and when the Lord will place his name, and where the Lord will place his name amongst his people." So we have an angel. It could be Joseph Smith, but an angel pointing down to the spot where the temple should be. Joseph Smith saying that where you see the colors fall, or I guess like the flag or flags fall, that's where you should build it. And then also the Ark of the Lord was seen in vision. And then when Brigham Young got there, he recognized Ensign Peak, of course, but in what we read today, he actually saw the temple itself. And what's interesting about that, and we'll end with this, is the same thing happened with Joseph Smith and his counselors for the Kirtland Temple. So this was 1833. When was this exactly? Because that's the year that the Saints were driven from Jackson County, even though this was in Kirtland. So this is June 1833. So this was like just before the expulsion from Jackson County. But anyway, meanwhile in Kirtland, we have this. Okay. So this is the account of, I think I have two. Yeah. This is the account of Truman Angel, church architect of the Salt Lake Temple, St. George Temple. Oh yeah, and brother-in-law of Brigham Young. You can find this in the Church History Library, Truman Angel Autobiography, 1884, pages 4 and 5. Okay, I here desire to mention a few more items in connection with the temple, talking about the Kirtland Temple. The work on the lower halls went on to the finishing of the stands and pews or slips, plastering and painting complete. About this time, Frederick G. Williams, one of President Smith's counselors, came into the temple when the following dialogue took place in my presence. Carpenter Rolfe said, "Doctor, what do you think of the house?" He answered, "It looks to me like the pattern precisely." He then related the following, quote, "Joseph received the word of the Lord for him to take his two counselors, Williams and Rigdon, and come before the Lord, and he would show them the plan or model of the house to be built. We went upon our knees, called on the Lord, and the building appeared within viewing distance, I being the first to discover it. Then all of us viewed it together. After we had taken a good look at the exterior, the building seemed to come right over us, and the makeup of this hall seems to coincide with what I saw there to a minutia." Now, this is really interesting looking at this with modern eyes because it almost sounds like a holographic projection. I'm not saying that that's what it was, but the way that we see in movies, you have these holographic projections that can grow in size, and you can interact with them. It's almost like this is the kind of experience that they had for the Kirtland Temple, and that's how the Lord showed them the Kirtland Temple. And this kind of sounds like what Brigham Young experienced with the Salt Lake Temple. So interesting. Continuing, Joseph was accordingly enabled to dictate to the mechanics, and his counselors stood as witnesses, and this was strictly necessary in order to satisfy the spirit of unbelief in consequence of the weakness or childishness of the brethren of those days. The following are a few items which transpired about this time. One I will note. Joseph came unto the hall, the loading mechanic, John Garl, by profession a carriage builder, want to seat the house contrary to what Joseph had proposed. Joseph answered him that he had seen the inside of every building, and that had been built unto the Lord upon this earth, and he hated to have to say so, Under such childlike feeling, they prepared to dedicate the lower hall. So it's like John Garl had a different idea of things, of how, I guess, the seating was supposed to be. And Joseph Smith is like, listen, I've received direction for every single building of the church up until this point in how it's supposed to be. This is what I saw in vision. I'm sorry. It has to be this way. Please don't question me. This is what the Lord wants. And then we have this from President Frederick G. Williams, second counsel on the first presidency. You can find this on the Joseph Smith Papers website. Minutes, circa 1st of June, 1833. The next case before the conference was to ascertain what should be the dimension or size of the house that is to be built for a house of worship and the school of the prophet, and receive a revelation on the size of the house. The word of the Lord was that it shall be 55 feet wide and 65 feet long. In the inner court, and the conference appointed Brother Joseph Smith Jr., Sidney Rigdon, and Frederick G. Williams to obtain a draft or construction of the inner court of the house. I would really like to know why those were the dimensions. Was it just practical, or is there something symbolic about those numbers? I still don't know, but whatever the case, those dimensions were revealed specifically by the Lord. So, yeah, future temples. I guess we should just be ready for whatever is revealed next. Maybe at some point the Salt Lake Temple is going to look different. Maybe it'll have more spires. Maybe it'll have one grand central spire, for all we know. But that's going to be it for this one. So if you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe. Like this video if you liked it. Leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also make sure to share it, and I'll talk to you guys later.